everyone, and welcome to another episode of Urja Talk. I am your host, Rama, and today we will engage in a thought provoking discussion on the profound impact of decentralized renewable energy, DRE, on rural communities in India. We are honored to welcome our guest for the day who is making significant contributions in the DRE sector. Join us as we explore her insights and the exciting possibilities for a sustainable future. Today is all about Rekha Krishnan, who is an accomplished professional with a rich background in business development and strategic planning. With extensive experience in driving growth and fostering client relationships, she excels in identifying opportunities and implementing innovative solutions. Rekha's strong analytical skills and passion for leveraging technology to enhance operational efficiency have made her an asset in the field of DRE. A collaborative leader, she is committed to continuously learning and thrives on building meaningful connections within the industry. Let's jump right into our discussion.
Thank you, Rama, for having me in this podcast series. A quick line about WEFT, the advisory firm that I lead. It's a small advisory firm that focuses on analysis and advocacy to try and reach innovative new age solutions to places and people who have so far been underserved and been at the margin, so to say. And one such bucket of innovation or interventions that we focus on is DRE. And I really believe that DRE has a potential to be a big part of the energy transition that both India and the world need right now from the environmental, social and economic points of view.
Rekha ji, given your extensive experience in the energy sector, what do you believe is the most significant role that decentralized renewable energy, DRE, can play in the socio-economic development of rural India?
So when you ask about DRE for rural India, which is the focus of your question, a picture that we had developed for parliamentarians comes to mind. And this is really, the picture was titled Energizing Adarsh Gram with Akshay Urja. So basically energizing a model village with renewable energy. And the picture had solar street lights, it had midday meal kitchens in the schools that were running on biogas stoves, hospitals and schools in the villages had lights and other equipment powered by solar. The farms had solar pumps, and there were also community livelihood centers that were powered by various kinds of DRE devices like solar refrigerators, biomass and solar dryers, food processors, and so on. So essentially, socioeconomic development of rural India can be powered by a range of DRE, and that really is the strength of DRE, that it is not a single technology, it is a bundle of various kinds of technologies that are clean and their point of views and point of generation of energy is the same. And that really is the strength that has to be tapped. So DRE, through a mix of mini grids, DRE appliances, can effectively replace and complement grid power. But when you ask in your question the most significant role that DRE can play, the single biggest role that DRE can play in rural India, according to me, is clean cooking. So I want to point to a very recent document of the government, which is really an NSSO document, which says that urban India, 80% in all states and nearly 90% in all states have access to or are using clean energy for cooking. But in rural India, the picture is completely different. In states like Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, and many of the northeast states, clean cooking energy for cooking is very low, often less than 40%. So to my mind, in clean cooking, there are a range of DRE technologies, whether they are solar cookers, biogas, clean biomass, including pellet-based biomass stoves, and these can really address that challenge of making clean cooking energy available for everyone. People are talking of electric cooking as a solution, but if we push electric cooking beyond, say, 30% of population, the initial studies are showing that rural and urban feeders may not be able to accommodate these loads, particularly if you take into account the time of day load, especially evening cooking. So given this, electric cooking may have some limited use, but we will really have to look to DRE for addressing that problem. DRE for cooking and more generally DRE for thermal is, to my mind, the most promising need. And when we look at DRE, I would also say that solar land is limited, rooftops are also limited. So rooftop solar and solar parks have a limited application in India, but we must look at agri PV, which is PV in the fields, and floating solar solar, which is solar on water bodies. These, according to me, have tremendous opportunity, particularly given that large solar parks we now learn are constructed with not without a huge opportunity cost. And also on rooftops, it need not only be solar, and I'm glad that small wind is gaining traction. So I'll pause here.
That's a powerful perspective, ma'am. What do you think are the key elements necessary to create an enabling policy environment for the growth and adoption of DRE solutions in India?
It is a good question. It's also a very difficult one. In terms of policy environment for DRE, very clear support for DRE has largely been around solar pumps through the PM Kusum scheme, and a little more recently for solar rooftop through the PM Surya Ghar scheme. And this is good, but in my view, the policy for DRE has to be, for example, the MNRE's DRE for livelihoods policy, which was drafted and shared in, I think, February 2022. That framework to me had most of the elements that I would like to see in a good DRE policy framework. I mean, a lot more detailing was needed, and many of us contributed to developing the document and also to developing some of the implementation detailing. But this document to me was able to visualize the many possibilities around DRE, and it was also not restrictive, it was not prescriptive, and according to me, that is a mark of a good DRE policy. When you ask for key elements, I would say that a policy framework that is encouraging, enables people to see the power of DRE, but does not restrict or prescribe. That's what the element of a good policy framework should be. That said, a lot of detailing is required, but then it is best left to the implementation area. So both the implementation agencies, which is the end user sectors, again, DRE being, energy generated at the point of the end user. So end user engagement becomes very important. So which sector or which department is DRE supporting with its energy? That agency or that department has to be a key part of this. So the overall framework may be there from the center, or from MNRE, but the user departments and user agencies have to be involved. And also in a spatial sense, DRE is very local. So ideally the district or the state at least should be engaged in this policy framing. And the role of that larger policy framework should really be to advise, to support to provide sort of technical advisory, and maybe have a decision support framework, provide a supportive expanded financing basket, and support some initial stages of, say, very new innovative DRE interventions and so on. So largely facilitative, not restrictive or prescriptive is the kind of policy framework that I would look for DRE.
That's actually very enlightening and very crisp. It's like very cleanly have put up. These are the things that need to be in place. Thank you so much. What do you think, are the biggest challenges that the DRE sector is facing today?
This is a good question, and also, like I said, DRE has been around for many decades. I mean, I know a lot so my start with DRE was about 10, 12 years ago when I started working with a small group of DRE practitioners. And since then, the sector has evolved way beyond solar lights and improved cook stoves. I mean, those were the primary technologies at that time, say about 2 decades ago. But DRE has definitely evolved. And according to me, there are many DRE technologies that are working and very effectively delivering reliable, affordable, clean energy for various uses. And there are hundreds, even thousands of many of DRE technologies working in India. But somewhere along the way, even though this DRE sector is, futuristic, but also at the same time, it's been around for a while. But given that nature of DRE, there is still not enough reliable data in terms of, there are so many technologies, this is where they are working, these are the challenges, these are the schemes that you can tap into. So as part of a recent effort, in fact, with Clean, so Clean and WEFT have developed a DRE information portal, which is now available on the Clean website, where we tried and put put out a lot of studies that are there, a lot of data that MNRE and government agencies have shared. State level mapping is something that we are continuing to attempt under this portal. But in fact, we notice that there are a lot of studies by various organizations, but these are, limited in the sense that they either have only a few DRE technologies or they are very case studies oriented, and the case studies also are rather anecdotal in their, tenor. So given that, if, I feel that if there's a clear documentation of what is working, where is it, it would definitely help in planning and policy making towards a bigger picture for DRE. But this is also something to do with, in terms of challenge, I think the challenge that is there, or there's a sort of dichotomy in DRE, because we keep wanting DRE to quote unquote scale up. But DRE, the D in DRE is decentralized. So its strength and its USP is that it is always to be custom made for a location or for an end user. So no easy scale ups are possible, and that's only natural because of the way the sector is. So, but there are attempts now, and there's a lot of pressure to expand DRE, and as if, a blanket replication can be done. There's a success story here in Karnataka. Let me go and replicate the same thing in Arunachal Pradesh. But that won't work, because then you're really losing out on the very, USP of DRE, which is that it can be customized for a context, for a sector. So, so therefore this whole focus on sort of replication and scale up to me is a little bit, I would even say, dangerous, because that can lead to DRE actually not succeeding, because you've just placed one success story in another sector with a complete, in another space with a completely different context, whether it is, pineapple dryers because the type of pineapple is different, or because the people there don't work at that scale or in that way that they work in Karnataka. Even though the value chain or the crop may be the same, there's some customization that is to be done. And this is what can work as a modular approach. So you have a basic solution, but you pay a lot of attention in customizing it for a context, and then you populate it, say, across the entire value chain in that area or across a whole cluster. That can be a way forward. For example, there are success stories in DRE for health centers. There are success stories in the mini grid space. So I think the challenges are there, and the challenges are really in the scale up and in the data for planning.
Those are substantial challenges. And what kind of stakeholder collaboration is important for DRE initiatives? Because when we talk about customizing these solutions for those communities, for certain areas, it becomes important to then put our focus on the stakeholders that are involved. So you have worked with various stakeholders, including government ministries, international organizations, and private companies, etc. How crucial do you think is a multi-stakeholder collaboration in driving the success of DRE initiatives?
See, in any effort, multiple stakeholders have to collaborate. So there's, that's really and DRE is in itself not a challenge. It's out there to solve a problem, which is providing clean energy for a particular application, say in a rural area or so. So there's no doubt that stakeholders have to collaborate. They have to work together. And I'll try and give some examples in terms of the work that we have done in different areas. So, for example, to my mind, one key stakeholder in DRE initiatives in rural areas have to be the SRLMs, the State Rural Livelihoods Missions. One is because they are the ones who have to expand rural livelihoods, and they are the ones on a day-to-day basis facing challenges, including the challenge of access to reliable power to power their livelihoods work. So in that sense, the SRLMs are the critical linkage for any DRE effort. But there's also the strength that SRLMs have, which is their links on the ground, their SHG network, which they have on the ground. And that really becomes critical for DRE, implementation. So to my mind, the SRLMs, along with the panchayats and various block development officers, depending on the scale of the state, should really be the best nodal points for a DRE effort. And what would be really important, and we've said that in many of our work with the states and also with MNRE, is a critical role that the SNAs, the state nodal agencies for renewable energy, can play in the DRE effort. And how can all of these agencies work together? So what an example, again, going back to, for example, whether it's pineapple or textiles, wherever you want to put in DRE. So, for example, if there is one person in the SRLM working in the ground or in a district where you are planning to look at DRE for, say, textiles, and if that is, or a certain crop, for example, you're looking at banana, for example, if you're looking at the banana value chain, and the SRLM who's working in that banana cluster should actually get exposure to DRE for strengthening the banana value chain. And in this, what can happen is if the SRLM officer then undergoes, say, a 2-3 day workshop to understand how can the banana value chain be strengthened and greened. And this will a little bit go beyond DRE. So you can look at, say, the improved biomass stove for frying the banana chips. You can look at solar powered storages for banana. You can look at banana processing, whether it's, banana pulp or so, or powdering of the raw banana. And then, so all this can be done, but you also have to add in the whole, so take care of, say, a zero waste, zero net carbon kind of value chain, where you also, for example, add in that the banana skin is not wasted, and the banana skin goes into either making vegan leather or it goes to generate biogas. So that way, you complete that value chain using DRE, but also other interventions. So this is where a lot of collaboration. So all of the vendors have to be involved who are in all these technologies, and they work very closely with, say, the SNA who's acting ideally as the technical advisory for the entire state and focusing on developing this banana cluster as a zero waste, net zero kind of cluster. And then the private sector can come in with, say, helping with the market linkages. Say a large agri company can come in with market linkages for the green, for the banana chips that are fried using improved DRE, for example, and or any other new product. Sometimes, dried banana, for example, it may be a new product, but it needs a market to be developed. So that's where private sector can come in, and they can also invest in developing these green clusters, and that actually companies can take up as part of their, scope 3 emission reductions, for example. So this is where, everyone comes in: government, the vendors, the NGOs, are implementation agencies on the ground, and then the private sector comes in with market linkages and investments.
What you're saying makes complete sense, and I think I would like to re-quote your sentence where you said that DRE is here to solve problems. It's not the problem itself. That I think is very well put. Bringing me to my next question, when we talk about other entities, organizations like World Bank, GSZ, and other funding agencies, how do you see their role in supporting DRE initiatives?
Many funding agencies are out there. I mean, at the outset, I want to say that DRE has been around for a while. It's also a futuristic sector with a big role to play going forward. So one was, to be very clear that DRE should not grow into a sector that is dependent on funding or philanthropy. It has to become a business sector. So that said, I want to, of course, there's a critical role for funding agencies and DRE initiatives, simply because this is an evolving sector and needs various kinds of support to grow. And it's also, in a sense, it should be complementing the traditional energy space, but it's actually sometimes also competing with it. That said, I don't want to single out any funding agencies because in the sense that each agency has its own mandate, and they're all doing great work. They have their own thematic areas and focal locations and so on. But what would be good is, rather than these agencies looking for, where are the overlap, they need to just come together and work in a complementary way. So I've always had this thought that, it's slightly idealistic, but that the funding agencies and other stakeholders come together and create a big mission for DRE, something like, say, 100 gigawatts of DRE that can energize, say, 1 crore lives. Something like that, a big mission mode kind of a thing. And then we go about this in a scientific way. So depending on the area of interest of each funding funding agency, we should be able to design this as a very scientifically thought through mission where we start out by mapping out high impact sectors. And by high impact, I mean high impact and not necessarily what they call low hanging fruit. So actually look at sectors that matter, people that matter, regions that matter, which can really benefit from DRE. And these could be, say, clean cooking or battery charging, say, infrastructure, agri feeders, wherever a range of DRE can be integrated. So we map out all these opportunities, and we could look at energy deficit areas in a very targeted way, for example. And when I say energy deficit, again, we tend to not look at unmet or latent energy demand. So you're often going with DRE to substitute fossil fuels, but you can also look at DRE to meet a need which never existed before. For example, if pineapples were being wasted, that's because there was never any storage. So you're not necessarily substituting fossil fuels, but you're creating a new demand for energy. So the mission that I'm thinking of could actually map out these opportunities, new opportunities which can be created through DRE. And that I think is a role that especially the larger funding agencies should play. And it's all about coming together for a common cause, which could be just energizing 1 crore lives and X number of livelihoods, could be through a range of DRE. And that's really DRE's strength, that it's a bucket of technologies that can meet various types of existing and latent or unmet energy needs.
It's very well put again when you talk about, funding agencies being the enablers and unlocking the entire end-to-end landscape of DREs rather than funding a certain initiative and not looking at the entire landscape. I think that makes a lot of sense when you talk about those being agencies that can actually create a demand for certain problems that were never addressed or never existed, unlocking new opportunities for communities, also to look at livelihoods as an alternative from DRE.
Sorry, I just wanted to add one thing, that when I say this 100 gigawatt of DRE, for example, if there is actually this mission that I often think about, and if this actually is done, so you can actually at the end of this sort of program, you can envision various clusters or regions or value chains which are entirely powered by DRE, and these then can become the inspiration for a lot more work. Right now, this does not exist. There are these sporadic efforts, but like I said, there are success stories like DRE for health centers. And if we can create these success stories in other value chains in other regions, then we can inspire a lot more of effective DRE implementation at scale without really going into a blanket replication kind of effort.
That's really a powerful insight, Rekha ji. And that concludes our podcast for today. So I would like to thank you for sharing your insights. It's clear that decentralized renewable energy has the potential to create transformative change in rural India. And your expertise sheds light on the pathways to achieve that. And we really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much. And that wraps up another insightful episode of Urja Talk. If you enjoyed today's discussion, please consider subscribing to Urja Talk and leaving us a review. Your feedback helps us bring you more engaging content. Don't forget to follow us on social media for the latest updates and to join the conversation. Thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to having you with us for our next episode. Until then, stay curious and committed to a sustainable future.